Thank you. On behalf of President Bush, it's my honor to welcome you to the White House and indeed to today's inaugural Compassion in Action Roundtable. Today's event kicks off a monthly series of conversations regarding the President's compassion agenda. At these events, we'll put the spotlight on some of the biggest problems facing U.S. society, and we'll introduce you to the faith and the community-based organizations that are solving them and tackling these problems head-on. As today's keynote speaker, Bob Woodson, has taught us, there's not a problem in America that isn't someplace being solved by a faith and community-based healer. In addition to profiling what works and why, though, we'll also consider together the policies and programs at federal, state, and local level that will enable more successes to occur. We'll present new developments in the compassion agenda, profile the administration's leaders who are helping to put these ideas to work. In all of this, we'll act on the central premise of the President's vision for the Office of Faith-Based and Community Initiatives, and that is to expand the supply of effective compassion in every community across our nation. On the day following Martin Luther King Jr. federal holiday, it's very fitting that today we're featuring a conversation aimed at reducing violence and promoting social order. And to lead us in this conversation, I'm honored to introduce the Deputy Attorney General of the United States as our first speaker. Paul McNulty has dedicated his career to the pursuit of justice, and he joins the Attorney General in promoting a crime-fighting model that advocates prevention as well as enforcement. Mr. McNulty has shaped crime policy from his days as advising former Virginia Governor George Allen through his service as a committee director on Capitol Hill and as a senior Justice Department official in both Bush administrations. I'm pleased to call the Deputy Attorney General a friend, and I'm honored that he could join us on a very busy day at the department. I'd like to welcome you now to the podium, Mr. Deputy Attorney General.
Thank you very much, Jay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very honored to be with you. I am excited about what this program has to offer and to see this combination of people from the community, from so many different aspects of our neighborhoods and the place where real problems are addressed, and the leadership of various agencies here at the federal level, and I know a number of folks here from state and local government as well. So this is an exciting opportunity, and I'm here just to greet you on behalf of the Department of Justice, and also to perhaps say a few words about the issue, the challenge that you're all here to consider today. I've had the honor, privilege of knowing Robert Woodson and his great work and the accomplishments of the Center for Neighborhood Enterprise. Back when I was on Capitol Hill, we did a hearing, probably now maybe 10 years ago, highlighting your work and encouraging it. Chairman Henry Hyde became a big fan and has remained a big fan. So it's exciting to see you all come together to study, in particular, a program that has accomplished a lot of good, and to think about how this can be used as a model for addressing this serious problem. In particular, we're here to talk about the impact of faith-based organizations in addressing our national problems. And it's so important that this conversation is occurring and has been occurring for a number of years now throughout this administration. This should be and will be the key legacies of this administration to promote fairness when it comes to the role of faith-based and community initiatives in addressing problems, because it's not enough to bring services. It's not enough to address physical needs. It's important that when grants are awarded, they can be awarded to programs that are there to provide services and to provide solutions that go to the core of who people are, that address issues of character. Because as we see in this subject, character is the key if we're going to make a change. And so I'm thankful for those people who have worked so hard over the last 6 years to advance the faith-based community initiative, to see that there is a more level playing field when it comes to the awarding of grant money. And they've done much more than that as well. Now, nowhere is it more important that we bring the faith-based community and other community organizations into addressing the problem than in the area of juvenile crime. We have just finished an 18-city tour of the United States. We did it in about 2 months and quickly went out and met with the law enforcement leadership and community leaders in cities that have had dramatic rises in murder and armed robbery. We also went to some communities where there were decreases. And the point of all of it was to figure out what was driving the recent increases in violent crime. To put it in perspective, we've had a long decline in violent crime, but in the 2005 FBI numbers and the victimization numbers, we saw an uptick. And we're waiting to see what the 2006 results will tell us. We want to know why, what was going on. And as we went around the country over the past 2 months, one thing stood out more than anything else. Juvenile crime, juvenile violence is driving the overall violent crime problem. And what's behind the rise in juvenile violence? Well, in some sense, nothing new, and yet there's something that feels new about it. What's not new is the fact that young people, unsupervised, can get into a lot of trouble. And where you have a lot of young people who don't grow up in the kinds of structures or don't have the kind of guidance or are left unsupervised during long portions of the day, where you have that, you're likely to have crime problems. But what's new are the things that confront young people in a way that maybe weren't there before, such as a culture of violence that we see on videos and television programming and other aspects of our culture and music, where the idea of life being cheap and violence being an option to use in the first instance without even thinking is more and more a concern among the communities. Law enforcement leaders told us in all of these cities where we saw an increase in violent crime that they're concerned that there are too many kids exposed to too much violence and too quickly resorting to violence for small little reasons. We also saw the influence of gangs on young people. And we have gangs of different kinds. We have international gangs that find a presence in the country. We have national gangs that try to go out and create franchises and branch out. And then we have gangs that just form overnight on a particular street corner. But one thing they have in common is that they stand in opposition to everything the community is trying to do, everything that the family, everything the school is trying to do, which is to try to raise someone to a point of responsibility and productivity in the community. Those gangs are there to say, look, come our way and stand against doing what's right, going along with what people want you to be. Find sanctuary in our culture of violence and find your strength and your definition there. And that's why gangs are such a wicked problem. And we're seeing communities across the country report increase in gang activity. So you're here to talk about the subject that is affecting violent crime in America, juvenile crime, and the increased violent nature of it. Now, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't take a moment to say that the administration has been doing a lot to try to deal with juvenile violence. Bob Flores is here from the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. We have a number of efforts underway to try to address juvenile crime and gang violence. Though the federal government doesn't typically prosecute juveniles, the states do that. We do everything we can to try to encourage them to take juvenile crime seriously. We have a rigorous gang enforcement strategy underway. Every federal prosecutor's office, every U.S. attorney office is charged with putting together and has put together a comprehensive anti-gang strategy, dedicated resources to it, increasing resources to it. And we are now pursuing a prevention and enforcement strategy with those offices to try to get at the different kinds of gang problems that exist. In addition, we picked 6 cities that have real significant gang problems, and set aside $2.5 million for each one of those cities to do an enforcement, prevention, and then re-entry of offenders, those who are coming back into the community after serving time in prison, to try to help them get on the right path and not back in with the gang members they knew before they went to prison. So there's a lot happening from an enforcement and a prevention perspective, but we need more. We need to end what I consider to be a cycle of violence in the lives of young people in violent crime in the cities. And here's what happens. So often folks get in trouble, young people get in trouble, and the message of the system is, we're going to look the other way this time. And then the next time, we're going to look the other way. And then the next time, and the next time. Because there's really nothing they can do. There are so few services within the government to provide real sanctions to hold people accountable so that they keep releasing folks back into the community. And as a result, they learn that the system doesn't work. And then they reach the age of 18, 19, and suddenly they commit a violent crime, and they're punished as adults and receive a serious prison sentence. And that's the wrong message. The message has to be that there is accountability for wrongdoing, and that there's a range of programs or sanctions available to hold people accountable, short of incarceration for those nonviolent type offenses. And that's why programs like the ones you're going to talk about today, and in particular the ones that Bob Woodson's folks have put together, get at this question of providing meaningful consequences, and yet care and concern for real people, bringing those things together to try to end this cycle of recidivism that we see among juvenile offenders. That is the key, it seems to me, to breaking the problem of violence in the cities, and it's going to require private initiative. It's going to require more effort by the states to have a range of programs available, and that's why fair opportunity with the awarding of grants is important to that. So in conclusion, thank you very much for your commitment to being here, for your concern for this subject. I wish you the very best as you talk about this today, and I look forward at the Department of Justice to hearing some of the consequences and the benefits that come from this kind of discussion. Congratulations to you, and thank you for your effort, Robert. Thank you all very much.
Thank you for those words, for framing the issue for us effectively, and for underscoring the administration's commitment to what convenes us today. There are a few other federal officials I would like to recognize. Director John Walters is a member of the President's Cabinet. You will be hearing from him at the end of the program, so I'll introduce him more fully in a short while. David Eisner is CEO of the Corporation for Community and National Service, and under his leadership, CNCS has made youth a very high priority, and in particular, the engagement of faith and community-based organizations to reach at-risk youth, and indeed, and very impressively, the engagement of youth themselves to give back and to serve their own communities, to address the problems they observe in their own neighborhoods. Harry Wilson is Associate Commissioner for the Administration of Children, Youth, and Families at the Department of Health and Human Services. Harry runs programs that serve over 600,000 homeless youth. He oversees 2,200 domestic violence shelters, and he serves as the department's lead for the President's Mentoring Initiative. And in addition to those formal responsibilities, Harry is champion of the department's Positive Youth Development Initiative, which seeks to celebrate youth for their assets and competencies rather than as problems that need to be solved. No doubt Harry honed that understanding as a head of a youth-serving organization in the grassroots of Michigan as well. So we're so appreciative of your innovative leadership at the department. Pop Flores has been mentioned by the Deputy Attorney General. He is Administrator of the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. He runs the anti-gang initiative that the Deputy Attorney General made mention to, and indeed is working innovatively to reform policy and practice at the department to support so much more of the type of model that we're considering today, and the bottom-up approach to crime fighting and problem solving that is so vitally important. I would like to draw your attention to the packets that you were given, because there are other collateral materials describing our agency's activities in more detail, some websites that you could read more about it through. And I'd like to make mention, of course, of the President's particular interest in this work. The President in October convened a school violence summit that some of you in this audience participated in. It is a priority that's high on his agenda, as well as the First Lady's. Moderating our second panel will be Cherie Harder, who is Director of Projects for the Office of First Lady, so you'll hear about their special initiative addressing these issues more from her. And I will, again, trust your sort of reading to deepen an understanding of what we're hoping to do collectively in service of the innovation that is being created, developed, and expanded at the grassroots level. So at this time, what I'd like to do is make a formal introduction of today's speaker. 15 years ago, I had the privilege of working alongside then Governor Tommy Thompson, who was charged with reinvention of the welfare system. He signed legislation in that state abolishing AFDC and was tasked with the responsibility to come up with a new idea. How could government more effectively care for the poor? Many of you know that story, and you understand how it developed. The governor of Texas at that time, Governor George Bush, was involved, and these reforming governors created a new understanding of how the public could do its work better. And it was heady times, I will tell you. We were in that process, reading all the best research and understanding the new models that were being developed to help people help themselves. And indeed, it was a remarkable work to be a part of. But then, one voice rose above all others that we were listening to, and that voice belonged to Bob Woodson. And Bob Woodson spoke into our process and said, "Congratulations, you are doing a good work. You are taking on a very serious social issue. How can government stop creating the wrong incentives for the poor, but instead create more healthy incentives for the poor to help themselves?" That's a very good work. However, that is only half of the work, because the groups that are actually coming alongside those that need to be restored to health and reintegrated into society and connected to employment, the groups that serve them most effectively are not those that act necessarily on the other end of a government's dollar or in response to a government policy. And we needed to widen our angle view of the agents of civil society that Bob had been studying and supporting for a couple of decades. And so we stand in his debt to reshape and expand the public conversation, which in many respects brings us here today. Bob was also, of course, on the ground in Texas, helping Governor Bush act on this premise and toward this promise, training the groups in Texas and Wisconsin and elsewhere that became terrific partners in the 1990s to make welfare reform successful. But also, he helped the governor, now president, form a blueprint for my office, the Office of Faith-Based and Community Initiatives, and the overall civil society agenda that we hope to operate under and to advance more fully. You can read the formal bio on Bob. He's a terrific author and a policy and social entrepreneur. Many of us have benefited by his wisdom, and I'm sure all of us will be inspired by his words today. So I'd like to welcome to the podium Bob Woodson. I'm sorry. Yeah, actually, my apologies. I think what we'll do is watch a brief video first on the model and the Center for Neighborhood Enterprise, and then Bob will come up directly following.
So I grew up 19 years residing in this neighborhood, and of the 19 years, I've seen this neighborhood change from bad to worse to good to the future.
With y'all public housing sectors, wherever, y'all cities, you had the presence of the police. And with us, we didn't.
story of a war among children, a war in which the latest victim was 12 years old.
When Daryl Hall, the 12-year-old, was killed in Benning Terrace, I had been training grassroots leaders, the Alliance Concerned Men, on how to intervene in gang violence. And so I said, well, God has made a decision for us as to where we should apply these principles. So they brought the leaders of the Avenue to Circle, about 16 of these young men, to my office. We searched them. They had on bulletproof vests. And I told them we were spirit-filled but not crazy. And they said to us that no one had ever asked them to be peaceful. And as a consequence of several sessions, they signed a truce, and we had a press conference. David Gilmore offered jobs. So they put down the guns and started to work to restore this community. And they planted grass, painted the walls. Kids who used to run from them began to run to them. Hundreds of kids were afraid to come into the streets, are now using the streets. We also helped them to get jobs, and now there has not been a crew-related murder in about 9 years in Benning Terrace. And this community has been truly transformed. People who used to be predators are now ambassadors of peace. And they volunteer their time, and they provide leadership, and Vernon and others provide leadership to the little kids. They are coaches, they are big brothers, they are fathers.
When the truce first came about, that was the biggest thing. You know, finding somebody who we can depend on, who we can trust.
The progress that has been made here in Benning Terrace in dramatically reducing violence and transforming predators into ambassadors of peace is a model for what can happen all over this nation. We've demonstrated that we can export this model. We have taken it to Dallas, to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Atlanta, Georgia, Prince George's County, and Baltimore, Maryland. In each place, the same miracle has occurred there as well. The gang violence in one school, the Madison High, went from 137 down to 0.
I remember my first day at school. We had a shootout in broad daylight at the first day of school. So this, the culture and the climate that Madison had, it was just straight chaos. Into my fighting every day. Someone gets stabbed, someone gets shot. This was Madison.
And the school, I think they were at wit's end saying, we need something, because the teachers are now being social counselors as opposed to being educators. They cannot educate because they have to deal with the community.
The in-school program was birthed out of an idea that we could change the whole environment within the school and the culture that exists in the school when the teachers are not able to teach, but allowing them to teach, and then we maintain the social behavior through the youth advisors who share the same zip code as some of the kids that are attending that school.
There are a lot of times when students may not open up to teachers, but they will open up to the life science personnel.
To save your community, to rebuild your community, to reestablish order and stability, you cannot get around finding this group. And they exist in every major city, every suburb, every rural county. You have these brothers. They may have different shades, different gangs, different reasons for being incarcerated. They may not never have been incarcerated. But this group is the only group that can save our community. I'm so convinced of that.
My vision for the future is that the model that has been effective here to be exported to at least 10 other cities. And my goal is to have youth ambassadors in about 10 schools in 10 different cities to dramatically demonstrate that violence can be reduced and civil order can be restored if we just invest in the real experts. And these are the people that are indigenous leaders, the grassroots healing agents that exist in every community in America. What is needed really are the resources necessary to take the model that has been effective in Benning and these other 5 or 6 cities and expand it throughout the nation. We know it works. It can not only save lives, but it can reduce public expenditures as well and empower people in these communities to heal themselves. I want to thank Jay Hine for sponsoring this forum, and also from my colleagues from around the country who have traveled to be with us to share their experience, and for others, our staff. I would like to just make some opening remarks, and then I'm going to introduce the panel, the real experts. As we said in the film, the past approaches to reducing youth violence have failed. Essentially, there have been of three types. One has been to, as Oprah Winfrey complained, taking young people from the environment and then helping them to change and transform. Then once they're reintroduced into the environment, there is a culture of failure which causes them to relapse into those old behavioral patterns, and they go back to the same practices. The other approach is to manipulate the incentives of the institutions within those communities. We talk about school reform, making smaller schools, improve teacher training, improvement, introduction of psychological services, and all these. In fact, the city of Baltimore spent over $20 million in school reform by reducing the school, taking one school, Southwestern, and breaking them up into smaller 4 schools, and then putting uniforms on the kids in one of the schools and computer labs, only to find out that that caused those kids to be targeted by other kids, and they were beaten on their way from school. And as a consequence, they told the kids to take off the uniforms. And so those kind of reforms didn't work. The other approach, of course, is cops, cameras, and curfews. And Washington, D.C. spent $7 million in 2 months in their crime emergency to reduce the problem, and yet it continues to go unabated. And so what all of these approaches, it seems to me that when we talk about school reform, we cannot talk about school reform absent the discussion about civil order. Because no matter what kind of reforms are instituted, if there is not civil order in those communities and kids are afraid to go to school, no amount of reform, no amount of teacher training or principles or the structure of the school are going to work. And therefore, it is important to understand that there's another problem we must face. Kids are not just passive recipients of incentives and sanctions. Years ago, I fought with the major criminologists, James Miller, Jim Miller, and Walter Miller, and the rest of them, James Q. Wilson, on this whole point. The assumption back then, as now, if you increase the cost of crime, crime will go down. That is assuming that kids make rational choices to commit crime based upon the incentive systems. What they don't seem to understand, threatening a kid with death is like threatening a kamikaze pilot with death. That is his life. Many of them don't expect to live long. I remember one kid said it's better to be wanted for murder than not wanted at all. That kind of reality cannot be faced by manipulating the incentive systems within our cities. It cannot be solved by rescuing a few kids and taking them out. You must understand, as James Q. Wilson said, if we predict that behavior is driven by incentives, and we alter those incentives, and the behavior does not change, or changes contrary to our predictions, we have to say that something else is working there. And I say, and he says, that something else is culture. Kids are operating in a street culture and in a moral zip code that most adults and most standards of people in society have no access to that culture. But they are compelled to come in your culture. And so what is needed then are therefore people that the young people respect, who have access to the culture of the young people. And so our youth advisors are people who are from that community, who share the same zip code, in some cases a geographic zip code, and others the cultural zip code, and therefore they are trusted. Some years ago, the Department of Education commissioned a study by the Secret Service, and they went around the country and to all of these youth killers to try to find out whether there was a common profile. After 2 years, they concluded that there is no common profile, but what each situation had in common, that the perpetrators, the predators, had told other kids what they were going to do prior to the time they did it.
And so our youth advisors call that the buzz. The first thing they do is come into the community and try to find out what the buzz is. Our youth advisors and our approach is very much based on the medical model. We know that the moment that the body is injured, healing begins. And that, so therefore, that's why AIDS is so devastating, because it overwhelms the body's ability to heal itself. And so what the youth advisors are people drawn from that community that have the respect, that are healing agents. Individually, they're antibodies. Collectively, they represent an immune system. And we know that the most effective way of healing the human body is to strengthen the body's ability to heal itself. We strengthen its own immune system. And we know the most radical and the most dramatic form of attempting to heal the body is a transplant. But yet most of us operate on the premise that we import and parachute into low-income, troubled communities remedies that are foreign to that community, and we wonder why they're rejected by the kids and by the people living there. So what I have done over the years is I look for a healing agent, and I found it back in my hometown in the 70s in the person of Sister Falaka Fatah and her husband David. They were the parents of 6 kids, 6 boys, and they found that the 16-year-old was a gang member, and she, as a social entrepreneur, said, I don't know anything about gangs, but I know something about families, and invited these 15 boys to come and join them in her home, moved out all the furniture, put mattresses down, and said, we're going to survive. Well, Sister Fatah did, and when the word went out that there was sanctuary, other young people showed up every day wanting peace in their life. And they purchased other houses on that block, and she said there's peace in our neighborhood but not in our city. So she reached out citywide to the whole active gang population, and I believe, Sister, they canceled the Mama's Day Parade. For the first time in the history, they said if you're crazy enough to bring these many killers together, that there's going to be chaos. Well, the only church that opened this door were the Quakers. None of the black churches would open their doors, and so the Quakers offered their 4th and Arch Street facility to them, and as a result, we had a no gang warfare campaign that she initiated, and the city went from an average of 48 gang deaths a year down to 2 as a consequence of her intervention. And we know for every youth shot, there are at least 4 in rehab paraplegics. And yes, Sister Fatah and her family exercise that leadership. I want you to give a hand to Sister who's here and David. And there is a product of her ministry is here, and I met him. He was a teenager, a gangbanger, who proved that transformation is possible, that kids, once they reach a certain age, are not godless, hopeless, and therefore unreachable. Curtis Jones here, who was a gang member in my hometown of Philadelphia, but went on, and his life is a living testimony of what it is possible for all young people to achieve, because he went on to finish college and become the City of Philadelphia's Director of Finance, and for 15 years ran a very profitable nonprofit that helped people get into business. And now I believe is a candidate for city council, along with Sister's son, Shaka, Congressman Fatah, who's also a candidate for the mayor. So I wanted to thank Curtis for joining us and as a witness. And so these antibodies, as Bill Chamber has said to me, the qualities that make these neighborhood leaders effective also renders them invisible, because they're not whining and complaining. They're not out shaking their tin cup begging for funds. They also, what's characteristic, they didn't start their effort as a consequence of funding, that their efforts predated funding. But also what they are, and the reason they are effective in reaching children, because they're not youth advocates. They are youth witnesses to the fact that transformation is possible. What they also do is not only transform the young people, by being models of what transformation looks like. They're moral mentors and character coaches. And their own lives are witnesses to the fact that transformation is possible. But what they also do that is unique is that they transform the culture in those communities so that when positive, life-affirming behavior takes place, it is not only welcomed, but encouraged and applauded. When the kids you saw there, Charlie Penny, and ex-gang members who now run football teams, 20 young black men volunteer every day with these kids, and as a consequence, 4 of them made the honor roll last year. They were applauded by 100 of their teammates in the same community that all others say, Oprah says, where there's discouragement. So the point of when school administrators and all are sitting down to plan school closures and public housing plans to close departments, they need to bring people in who understand the cultural demographics of the community, because when you close certain schools down, that means gangs are going to have to walk through alien turfs, and it's going to develop all kinds of conflicts. And so it seems to me that these neighborhood leaders need to be brought to the table as we're formulating policies of reform and transformation. And right now, without further ado, I would like to introduce to you the people you'll hear from who are the real experts. And I'm going to ask them to come up as I call their names. Gwen Sands. Gwen is from Atlanta. There are 2 types of Josephs, as I said in my book. Those that never rode on a stolen bike, and those that have ridden on stolen bikes. Gwen is one of those like myself who never rode on a stolen bike. But the reason that she is trusted by young men who spent 5 and 10 years in prison is because she has a heart for the people she serves. And her faith in them and the commitment to them always stands as a testament to what she believes. The next person is Curtis Watkins. Would you come up? Curtis is the other kind of Joseph. I won't give you any details, but Curtis used to be a part of the problem in East Capitol dwellings and at Bladensburg. It's ironic that he should be called the Bladensburg, John, because that's where he started his problems. And God has brought him back to the same place to transform that which he helped to destroy. The next person is Ramon Candelaria, a staff member of the Latino Community Center in Milwaukee. Ramon, like Gwen and myself, never rode on a stolen bike, but was an athlete when he finished college, but then went back to serve his community and walks the street at night, placing himself at risk. And Omar Jawar of Dallas, Vision Regeneration. When I met Omar, he was in prison. Let me explain that. As a prison employee. This brother was serving as had a job I don't think anyone else. He was an employee of the prison, and his job was to resolve conflicts within the prison between black and brown gangs. And I remember 2 situations that speaks to his heart and the quality of this person. And I remember when I visited Gainesville, there was a hit coming out from solitary on somebody in the prison population. So Omar went to the warden and said, I want you to place one of the inmates that I work with in solitary so he can go in and find out what the problem is. And so he admitted and after 3 days told Omar what the nature of the problem was and who had the hit on and why. Omar went to that person and asked for it to be removed. And this person was released from solitary. The inmates never knew what happened, but that shows you the trust that he had of the inmates, but also of the administration. And one other word that I can't not mention is when when one inmate, Hispanic Mexican Mafia, was released from prison to San Antonio, Texas, a condition of his release was that he could not be active with the gangs. But a condition of his coming back, he had to come back to the gang. So Omar got on an airplane without knowing ever been to San Antonio and met with the Mexican Mafia. And they were speaking Spanish around a table and laughing. They were discussing who was going to kill him. But Omar's courage in pleading for this man's life caused them to gain respect, and they released this man from their control. That speaks to the kind of caliber that we have as youth advisors. And then Baltimore, Billy Stanfield. Billy's in that other group. Billy used to be a drug dealer in Baltimore. He went to federal prison, and his life was transformed. And now he's giving back to this community that which he took. And Billy is doing a fantastic job in Baltimore. And I would like to introduce them, but I also want to acknowledge B. Tignor. Where is B? Dr. Tignor? There she is. She was the former head of the school board in Prince George's County. And the reason I'm acknowledging her, because Prince George's County is the first district where a progressive-minded leader of the school board, when she heard our presentation at the school board meeting, got on the school bus, took every member of the school bus, and we went to see Billy's school, and they spent a half a day walking the halls of this school, and when they saw evidence that real transformation had occurred, they went back, and then she brought Dr. Daisy, the superintendent, and they were the first to fund a violence-free zone in the school district. The school paid for it. And Mrs. Hughes is here, I believe, the principal of, there she is, of Bladensburg. And I'm sure Dr. Daisy, when he is making his presentation, will tell you more. We wanted to bring people together who are making a difference, who are transforming kids, who are transforming cultures within communities, so you can understand how they do what they do. And then we're going to hear from people who have immediately benefited from it so they can give you their reactions. But everything we do, we try to emphasize, we're saying to you, don't support them because they're faith-based or because they're community-based. Support them because they are making a difference. They are accomplishing change that is measurable. They are being accountable for what they receive. That should be the standard against which we judge any approach. Is it working? And so with that, I'd like to introduce our panel, and I'm going to ask Gwen if she would start, and we'll just come right on up.
Good afternoon. I'm honored to be here this afternoon, and before I begin, I'd like to invite our Atlanta contingency to please stand. Mr. Bevan Carpenter is a member of our leadership team. I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Carpenter. Ms. Tamara Cotman is the Executive Director of School Reform Team 4, in which our schools are located. And Ms. Cotman did significant research and investigation and is now one of our most devout supporters. And I want to thank her for attending. And representing our board is Monique Dabney. And thank her for attending. Visions Unlimited is successfully implementing the Violence-Free Zone initiative in 2 Atlanta middle schools. I invite you to join me this afternoon in a journey of transformation. Travel with me back 18 months to 2 middle schools in our area, schools rampant with high suspension rates, low attendance rates, local rival crews entering school property to settle a community-based score, a roving gang of young ladies walking through the halls, gathering members to settle a dispute with a rival. Multiple daily school fights in both schools, out-of-control lunchrooms. Let's expand our journey to the community. Atlanta Zone 1, one of the most violent in the nation. Come with me into the communities to Bankhead Courts, Bowen Homes, Hollywood Courts, and Herndon Homes. Atlanta Housing Authority property is home to at least 5 local crews, where students are afraid to visit family members in neighboring communities, where students are afraid to visit local malls, where community feuds routinely find their way into our schools, disrupting an environment dedicated to committing to educating the future leaders of our nation. Enter Visions Unlimited, a chosen team, a diversified team, retired school personnel, former gang members, Visions graduates and their parents, former customers of the justice system, enter ambassadors of peace, youth advisors who serve in each middle school as hall monitors, mentors, tutors, and support for teachers and administrators, enter ambassadors of peace, youth advisors assigned as community leaders in our satellite offices in those 4 Atlanta Housing Authority properties to further support the students upon their return home from school, wraparound services for the students and their families, out-of-school time initiatives, family support services in education and financial literacy. The purpose? To transform the environment, to transform hopelessness into hopefulness through love and mutual respect in a family and community-supported environment. You see, as the child's belief and culture are transformed, the family, the community, must also be transformed. The strategies: when students walk through our doors, we visualize, we see their very souls, not at-risk students, but at-promise students. We see successful students, contributing citizens hiding behind gold grills, sagging pants, tattoos, jail sentences, gang affiliations, precious jewels, anxiously waiting for someone to believe in them, to care, to nurture their success, their dreams, to support their desire for transformation. And the results? Let's end our journey today with a visit to those same schools and walk those same halls where we now find peaceful learning environments, where there is a 50% reduction in school fights, a 59% reduction in classroom disruptions. The school where those roving female gangs and their rivals are now engaged in positive lunch bunch activities with Vision staff, where those same gang members, former gang members, and troublemakers are not talking about fighting now. They're talking about their future, their goals, college even, in middle school. Oh, and let's not forget that all 11 of the original Vision's 8th grade students who were initially experiencing school failure are now in high school after successfully passing the No Child Left Behind required CRCT, the Criterion Reference Competency Test. And we cannot end our visit at one middle school without a chat with one of the former troubled middle school students expelled from his middle school, expelled from the alternative school, who completed his GED within 2 months of enrollment in our services, and who now serves as a junior ambassador and will soon be attending college. Yeah. And finally, they told us that it couldn't be done. 4 warring communities coming together under one roof without incidences of violence. Yet, beginning in July 2006, we successfully, peacefully brought together more than 100 students and their families, ages 5 to 17, from the 4 warring communities, Bankhead Courts, Bowen Homes, Hollywood Courts, and Herndon Homes, in unity celebrations, the Summer Unity Games modeled after the Olympics, and Thanksgiving and Christmas unity celebrations, with no incidences of violence, with no incidences of violence. Our school-based ambassadors tell us they also see the difference in our schools, as former rival crews and warring students peacefully exist in the same building, because now they are family. The vision for our youth, given by our youth, self-reliant, empowered, and resilient adult citizens armed with determination and advocacy, who exhibit through their leadership, character, and integrity a commitment to making a positive contribution to their communities. We invite you to visit the Atlanta Violence-Free Zone Initiative, where we are quietly and strategically with excellence, transforming Atlanta one youth at a time, one community at a time. Thank you.
And I also want to acknowledge our principal, Ms. Hughes, again. She allows us to do what we do in the school. When Bob talked about acknowledging people around the country, in some respects, I look at the youth that we deal with in Southeast Washington, Prince George's County, is somewhat like they're in another country in some respects. And I'm looking at it from the kids' point of view or their lens. And that's what our youth advisors do on a daily basis. They work with these kids in the respect that they see something that the kids cannot see in themselves. They're able to, I look at this, I call it duality. You have off and on, you have darkness. When we see dark, our youth advisors see light. And a lot of times these kids just want somebody to listen to them. And that's what our youth advisors do on a daily basis. They listen to these kids. They allow them to be themselves, whether it's right or wrong, but they allow them to be who they are. And then they meet them where they are. And then they can take them somewhere else from that point on. What I found in doing this work is that a lot of our kids are like diamonds in the rough. And if we don't give them an opportunity to shine, they'll never shine. But what our youth advisors do on a daily basis, give them an opportunity to shine. The Peaceaholics is one of our partners here in D.C., and what they do, they reach out in the depths of the community and allow these kids to see that there is a future. And that's the same thing we try to do. We try to give these kids an opportunity to see, just because you're a product of your neighborhood or you're living in an environment that says that everything else is chaotic, you don't have to be chaotic. And the reason why I know that firsthand is because I was one of those individuals. I'm what they call at this point an OG. I'm 50 years of age, and I did my dirt when I was younger. And I realized some things, as Mr. Woodson said. Bladensburg was one of those schools that I major in entrepreneurship in the parking lot. And the East Capitol community was another one of those areas where I majored in entrepreneurship. But I understand that a lot of times that these kids possess skills, but we don't give them the opportunity to show them these skills that they possess within them. Given the opportunity, these kids can be awesome, be honest with you. We see them making changes. At one point, and I just share this, and I'm just doing this to let you know, kids who were stealing cars probably like 2.5 years ago, what we did a go-kart club. We taught them mechanic skills. We taught them discipline. And in order to participate in this go-kart club, you had not to be incarcerated or court, still in a car, or anything of that nature. And what these kids showed us is that they had a mechanical aptitude. And a lot of people didn't realize that they would be able to put a go-kart together in a very short period of time just as well as when they were stealing cars. We shifted that negative behavior into a positive behavior, and it was only through people that work with us who share the same zip code with these youth advisors that we were able to do that. One of the things that I'm going to say, and I have the opportunity to say, God is in control, and he's truly in control, because what we're doing is not normal. It's truly not normal. The people that work with us at times, they're not normal. But these people have something in their heart that they're willing to touch that other young person's heart in a way that that young person is willing to listen to them and shift those behaviors. We've been able to reduce truancy. We've been able to reduce the suspension rate. We've been able to shift some of these kids in reference to their academic thoughts related to that they have potential. One of the situations that I remember that Ms. Kayana Bradley was involved with, that a young person was failing, and Kayana worked with that young person to show him that he had a lot of potential, and that he did an assignment. He got an excellent grade. I think he got an A in that particular assignment. And he asked her, he said, "Where were you at the beginning of the year?" These are what these kids are looking for. They're looking for people who they can connect with, people who are sincere and who are not there just because of a program. This is not a program. This is a movement. This is a movement from the bottom up. And what we've been blessed with is to have people that surround us that have that same type of heart. And so I've been with Mr. Woodson since 1998 now. And I've been to Russia. I've been to a lot of areas. But more importantly, I've been in the depths of the community. and saw that change can come from the community. And a lot of times we don't ask people, what can they do for someone else? We're always saying, what can I do for you? So what we're doing, we're flipping that script and we're asking them, what can you do for someone else? Because they become responsible for themselves and someone else, and they feel a lot more. Their self-esteem rises. So it's a blessing to be here and talk to you guys in reference to what we're doing. And we're in Bladensburg High School. We're also in Largo Senior High, and we're also in Kelly Mello Middle School. And we have teams of 5 youth advisors in each of these schools. And they're making a difference in these schools. Thank you.
It was just last week, Jose, who was 15 years old, was talking about gathering his cousins and some of his friends because he was fed up that there was a boy older than him at his high school making fun of his shoes. You could see that the shoes were in terrible shape. As a matter of fact, you could see that his socks were in terrible shape. And I heard this conversation, and I offered to buy him some shoes. And it was on that ride from the LCC to the Foot Locker where I got the opportunity to listen and hear him talk about how these shoes made him angry with his family because they wouldn't buy him some presentable shoes. Then he talked about how those shoes bothered him in school because all they did was talk about his shoes in the classroom. And since getting these shoes for him, a couple things happened. Number one, he told all his friends about the experience, and they all wanted me to buy them some shoes. And I couldn't buy them shoes, but what I was able to do was help them with other situations in their life that were just as valuable as those shoes. And in both situations, at the home, school, and in his community, it was these shoes that kept him back. And often it's situations like these that drive young people into a life of crime, of using and selling drugs, and being out there on the street looking for this. Even more profound than the shoes and everything else, these shoes, since then he hasn't missed a day of school. And even deeper than that, that fight that was supposed to occur never occurred, which would have been much more than one fight, because it moves on. So it's through these pair of shoes that he was reconnected to his family, to his school, and his community. Very important. Our job and our goal is to keep young people especially connected to their schools and to their families. You have that, you have an opportunity to succeed. The chain of events of that pipeline of prison and drugs, that chain of events has to be interrupted by any means necessary. And once we do that, these kids are again reconnected to what matters most, is their family, their school, and the community. It's with that outside intervention that our youth leaders, that opportunity to come in and be available in the classrooms, in the hallways, in the cafeterias, beyond that, via cell phone on the weekends and late at night, which I know all of our advisors and directors share. It's that outside intervention that, without it, the kids that continue to struggle as it exists today, the way business is taken care of today, a lot of those young people will never graduate, sustain a family, or get a job. And we got to create an environment that the culture of failure is just totally rejected no matter what the circumstances are. And it's built on a theory that young people that are connected to positive people in positive ways will be successful. In our first year, like everybody at the table here, we experienced a 48% drop among youth of violent incidents among the youth in our programs, a 43% increase in their academics, and a sharp reduction in unexcused absences, which is continuing to plague our schools. None of this is possible without our youth leaders, but also partners like the National Center for Neighborhood Enterprise, partners like yourselves and the funding community. I'm going to finish with a couple points or stories. There's a story about a man who is driving down a dark road, and it could be viewed as dangerous. In Milwaukee, it's called 20th and Pierce. And there's a gentleman who's pulled over, and the guy driving knows that this person needs some help. And he wants to help him, but he starts to think about what's going to happen to him if he gets out of his car and helps this person. And almost immediately, that other voice comes in and says, you need to think about what's going to happen to this person if you don't get out, and not what's going to happen to you if you do get out. And I know that's the philosophy that we share. So this is about driving past these schools and knowing that it might look dark and dangerous, but we must pull over and get out. Because if we don't, we need to wonder what's going to happen to these kids and the schools and administrators and the people. This is about pulling over and going in and offering that help. I want us to consider two more things. What is the price that we will pay if we don't do enough? And then I have a little piece that I want to finish with. And I'm going to ask everybody to follow me for a second. Can everybody lift their hands for me? And I can see everybody. It's on camera if you ain't following it now. I got some people that were on stolen bikes that don't mind going back. No, I'm just joking. Make a little circle here. Can you make a circle? Okay, now bring it down slowly. I'll put it right here on your chin, right there. And then I want you to look around and see how many people got it on their chin. Okay? That means that even intelligent people can follow the wrong example. That means that you will do what you see much more than what people say. So as much as we try to talk to people and say, hey, do this, do that, if they don't see us doing it, it ain't happening. The most powerful example I see from all of this and being a part of this family is that you could talk about the stolen bike that we rode. As a matter of fact, I rode one, but I didn't get caught. But the power is when we are a testimony, we hear that a lot. Whether you were on one or you won't, they saw us, they know us. And that's what's made change. If we have an opportunity, Jorge Perez, the Associate Director of Latino Community Center, is here, if he could stand up. He's been my partner from the get-go. Andre Robinson is one of the leaders at South Division High School. And if we have an opportunity, I would hope that he could share his feelings because they're the ones there. We have Bill Jolly, who's a board member of Latino Community Center. Rick Wiederhold, who is board member, father, mentor, financial consultant, financial investor, just a lot. From Milwaukee, who's on our board. And Michael Grebe, who will be speaking in a moment, who's been a great motivator and support and investor in this movement. So I appreciate your time, and I hope that we can challenge each other with some questions. And I'm truly honored to be in your presence and be called to serve people.
Well, first, let me thank Bob for putting this together. It's an honor to be here, absolutely an honor. I feel like Bob is a mentor, father, friend, and sometimes he can challenge you in ways that that you don't believe you can accomplish what he says, but he's usually right. So thank you for allowing us to be here. And thank you for coming, and to all of the Dallas contingency. I have Mr. Patrick Brandt, who is the president of Skywise Software, who is here. Mr. Steve Rabb, who is also a business leader and former CEO of DSVP. And I have Dr. Marcus Martin, who is here. If you could stand in the back. He is the president of the Williams Institute, who is here with us. I'll be very brief because I know that you hear these stories a lot, and hopefully you believe our stories if you don't believe anyone else's, because it is absolutely the truth. I never forget, I met Bob Woodson. I was working in the prison, and one of the young men who left the prison, Eric Rivas, he was kicked out of Louisiana because of his record. Couldn't go back to Louisiana. He was a very tough young man, but he was a young man that I had grown to love. And Eric left Dallas and went to D.C. And when he went to D.C., he called me and said, man, I found somebody who sounds just like you, except he's old, but he acts just like you. I said, really? He said, yeah, man, he talks like you. He said, man, I'm telling you, you need to meet this dude. I said, all right. So I was going to prove to Eric that Bob wasn't real. I said, I'm going to write him and tell him to come to Dallas and come to the prison and do a book signing, because he had just finished a book, and give all the brothers a book. So I said, you got to test people where they are, Eric. And a month later, Bob came with a bunch of books and 1,000 books, and did a book signing in the prison and gave all the young men books, and he challenged us. And he said to me, if you're doing this with these young men in the prison, you can do it on the street. And that's how we begin this relationship. And Gwen Williams, who is a friend, and she told me to be faithful. And I've been trying to do this. And I also want to say this, someone over here, Jeff Daly, who is a member of Bob's board and a member of Indianapolis, but he was one that has been with me through many escapades. But thank you for being here also. Let me just say this to you, that youth violence and youth crime is inextricably tied to young urban adults and culture. The gem that we are missing, see, I'm gonna tell you, what it could sound like that we are saying the same thing you're saying to your child. Well, why doesn't it work? The reason it doesn't work is usually when we are talking to urban young people, we are not using the people who have the most influence on their lives. Those people are usually buried under problems, prison, under a shroud of secrecy, under dope deals, under dice games, under baby mama drama. They are buried. So you can't find the people that are the most effective at stopping youth violence. But I'm telling you that there is no better individual to go back into the heart of that fire than the people who have been successful or even unsuccessful while they are in those environments. When I started this, I met with 50 blood gang members in a pool hall. It was just me and them. They searched me, I didn't search them. Because I was afraid. But we went to a pool hall, and I gave them about 5 basic questions. I said, how many of you brothers have problems with your baby mama? 100% raised their hand. I need to ask that question right now, see how many people raised their hand. I said, how many of you are having criminal problems? They raised their hand. I said, how many of you are selling dope? Raise their hand. I said, listen, let me just give you a basic scientific analysis. What you doing ain't working. You know, just based on those questions and your answers, you ain't successful. And then I told him, I said, do you know it's people who are making millions of dollars studying you like the Bigfoot, like the Loch Ness Monster, taking pictures of you when you sneak out your room. I said, and you getting shot at being you. You know, it's some folks making sure their house payments are paid because of you, and you getting kicked out the ghetto being you. It don't make sense. I said, let me tell you that there is a market value in you being who you are. See, I'm gonna show you something. Baby tigers are loved by older tigers. They are feared by people who don't love tigers. See, you can't raise what you fear. Most people who are saying they want to change communities are deathly afraid of those communities that they are saying that they want to change. You can't, I want you to hear that. So it's hard to invest in what you're afraid of. I'm telling you that the most peaceful folk are the folks who are in the center of a storm. They don't even understand they're in the storm. They don't even acknowledge all the depths of pain and problems and processes that they got to go through. They are sitting there just in the middle of a storm, and I'm asking them, how are you peaceful? And they said, man, because I'm not worried. They give me short answers. I'm not worried about it. I'm just here. It's my lifestyle. And I'm amazed at their peace. And I asked them one question, can you transport the peace you have in your heart to the babies that you see in front of you? Your little sisters need this peace. Your grandmama needs this peace. Your auntie needs this peace. America needs this peace. And you're the only one that can bring this peace to them. And we have been successful in Dallas, and I will bring this, to a conclusion. Hopefully we can talk more specifically about how we do it. But we did the first gang, Truce, in Dallas, when I was on TV talking about we're going to change this community. And I didn't know it was some young folks in prison watching me saying, what is he doing in our community, talking about what he going to change? And they got out of prison and came and found me and said, we saw you on TV talking about us, Anton Lucky, the guy you saw in the video, who was the OG of all the Bloods. He created the blood gangs. He said, the only way you're going to create peace, brother, is you're going to have to get the Crips and the Bloods together. I said, well, where is the leader of the Crips? He said, he's in that dope house around the corner. So me and Anton Lucky went and knocked on the dope house door and asked the Crip OG, can you come and talk to us? The first reaction was shock and awe, and it was for real on both ends because we didn't know how that was going to turn out. But those two young men gathered 1,500 folks, and Bob Woodson flew down and spoke to those young men and said, if you promise peace, we'll promise you our life forever. See, the other part of this is you have to be willing to invest all of you if you want to save some of them. And the last thing I want to say is that the culture that Bob talks about is, I tell people all the time, that young people want to drink milkshakes, fall in love, do the twist. They want to do all that stuff. They just don't know that it's possible.
The twist?
The twist. They don't just drop it like it's hot.
I thought it was the Tootsie Roll, maybe. The twist.
They don't do the twist, man. But when you are not, listen, when you are not afforded the opportunity to smile, when you are living in an unfiltered world where your world goes this fast and death and violence looks the same, love and sex looks the same, that beauty is defined by your breast and not your brains, that your manhood is defined by how many folks you whoop, not how many books you read. When you are in that environment all of the time, it's hard for you to hear folks talking civil when your life is so uncivil. So you got to slow down the culture, bring these brothers, put them back in that culture, and create the kind of paradigm shift that we need to change America. I hope that if you don't believe me, believe Bob. Bob has been faithful long enough. I want everyone in the world to know that our young people are not going to die, at least without a fight. Thank you.
Forgive my voice. I'm a preacher. I had to preach 2 sermons on Sunday, and my voice is just about abated me. But I'm going to get this message out that I need to get today anyhow. First, I want to thank Mr. Woodson for just believing in me and giving me the opportunity to change young people in Baltimore. I want to acknowledge Brother Derek Compton. Please stand up. I want to acknowledge Brother Derek Compton. He's one of my program coordinators at New Vision Youth Services, and they do such a phenomenal job in helping engage our young people in positive activities. We have a sign when you come in New Vision Youth Services, and it says that you were born to win. Yeah. And this is how we look at our young people. Despite what they're going through, what mistakes they have made, we look at them as winners who only need to be shown how to win. I'm living proof that you can change your life around. I was in federal prison. I did 5 years in federal prison. And they said the recidivism rate was 85%. So 4 people got released the day I got released. So that means 3 of us were supposed to come back. I was born in a middle-class home. I don't share the story of what most inner-city young people share. I went to Cardinal Gibbons High School. I'm an intelligent person. Had both parents in the home, was an All-American basketball player. I graduated in 1987. Went away to college, but started hanging out with people who didn't have the right aspirations in life. And I ended up in the streets selling drugs. I met Jamaicans, Colombians. So I never knew what it was like to be on the corner. I was a middleman making a lot of money. And that life came to an end. I was shot up in both legs in 1993. I self-surrendered to federal prison in 1996. I came home August of 2000. But while in prison, I did a lot of introspection, because keep in mind, I had the right foundation. See, my life wasn't a product of my upbringing. My life was a product of me hanging out with the wrong crowd. There's an old saying that says birds of the same feather will flock together. We say that sometimes. And when Mr. Woodson approached me, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, I met him at my church. I was already the youth pastor at my church. I was a sales manager and finance manager at a dealership. So when he met me, I had already had my life together. I had it back in order. I was already serving in the community that I serve now, and I was volunteering. I would work 12 hours during a day and still found time to get down to the church and deal with these youth in a very troubled inner city community. And what I realized is that if I grew up with both parents in the home, never knew what it was like to want, had the best of everything, and I ended up in the street, how much more will these young people that we call at risk, but I call them winners, could end up in a situation of death, destruction, and jail because of a lack of structure, where their fathers are in jail, mothers strung out on drugs, and there are not a whole lot of resources in the community. So one thing that we do at New Vision Youth Services, we look at life through a child's reality. We don't condone the things they're doing, but when you are in an environment and a 14-year-old has to go home because the mother is strung out on drugs and the father not in the home, and they trying to bring resources into the home to feed their little brothers and sisters. When I introduced this program to Southwestern High School, I told the teachers, if you want to teach at a country club, you know, maybe you want to go to some parts of Montgomery County, but here at Southwestern High School, these children have have real situations that they face every day. And I wonder if we had to face the situations that they had to face at 14 and 13 years old, what would we do? So one of the ways that we are effective is that we look at life through their reality. We meet them where they are. We give them a lot of respect and a lot of love, because a lot of these children are disappointed. They see a lot of us as the enemy, because they've been hurt by adults. They've been hurt by a system and a school system that appears to them as not in their best interests. So we entered this school, Southwestern High School. Anybody ever know that movie, Lean on Me? About Crazy Joe Clark? When I walked into that school was just like that. It was all over the place. The gang members had control of the school. Drugs were being sold all over the place. But we went into the school understanding, looking at these children, not as problems, not at risk, but as winners. And what we did was reach out to each child, shaking hands every day, speaking a kind word to them. The school allowed us to do a school assembly where we can introduce ourselves and give our personal testimonies so they can understand that we were people just like them, from the community, from the hood, if I can use that term, coming into the school to help, trying to help them make better decisions. How many know young people have to make at least almost 800 decisions a day? And most of the decisions that they're making are wrong, and most of the decisions are wrong because of the cultural environment to which they've been exposed. So what I'm going to tell you today is that we all have an expertise. I told a group of people, I don't know a whole lot about Beverly Hills, but I know a whole lot about the streets of Baltimore. I know a whole lot about selling drugs and why young people do what they do. And what we ask you today is to respect our expertise. I know things about the streets that you don't know. You're guessing about it because you didn't grow up in that environment. I don't know what it's like to be a congressman or a senator, but I know what it's like to grow up in an environment where there's despair. I didn't experience it growing up, but because I was a drug dealer, I seen women selling their TVs and taking their checks and giving it to the drug dealer, which was me at that time, even if it meant that their children didn't eat. And see, this is how we can change our nation. Understanding that we are the antibodies, as Mr. Woodson called it. We are the urban specialists. We are the Marines. You need to send us in first so we can change the culture and get the mindset of our young people right. And as long as we hesitate in embracing this philosophy, crime and violence is going to continue to increase. I'm in Baltimore City, where we face an array of challenges on a daily basis. You would think that the city officials and the government would get behind us and support us in light of the results that we have proven in the school. Here's the results. We produce numbers, not theory, we produce numbers. And in every city that this program has been implemented, the numbers as they pertain to violent behavior, disruptive gang activity, they are down. So I hope that I've caused you to look within yourself, to understand that we need you. We need your resources, but you also need our resources. I want to give you one closing story because Mr. Woodson asked me to give this story. There was a white teacher in Southwestern. Her classroom was down in the basement. This is the first year we was in this school. Some young kids kept hanging in the hallway. She asked them to move out of the hallway. One of the children threw a snowball at her. She went to the school officials and nothing seemed to get resolved. So she came to New Vision. Now keep in mind, these young kids kept hanging downstairs every day, messing with her. She was afraid. She came to New Vision because we were able to make a connection with the children because they don't see us as the police. We're not the police. That's not our objective. The police serves its purpose. But we come in to change the culture of the young people, to help them to believe in themselves, to help them understand that their lives have purpose and they don't have to be a victim of their culture. We sent a word out about this incident. That's all we did, was send a word out, and people heard us speak on it. If anybody else messed with this teacher, if we found out who it is, you're coming down to the dungeon. We have a room called the dungeon, and you have to deal with us. Because we were able to obtain the respect of the young people, it stopped. Till one day the teacher came out and asked a group of men to clear the hall. One of them called her a B-I-T-C-H. One of the young men stood up and said, man, don't call her a B-I-T-C-H. That's not the way you talk to women. See, these are things that go unnoticed, but they are evidence that the culture can be changed if you send the right people into the environment who can impact that culture and make a connection with the young people. Thank you very much.
I want to thank our panelists and turn the program over to Jay. We'll continue. Yes, sir.
I just want to say that I teach in public schools in the District of Columbia at Kelly Miller. And I can witness the value of the programs that have come in. And I go in there every day, dressed this way, for a reason. And I tell them that don't get fooled by my bow tie, because I grew up in this neighborhood. And what I try to do also with children is to get them to trust me so they can talk to me. But when opportunities come along, I take them with me when I come to events like this. This is one of mine. She's not at Kelly Miller. She promoted out of Kelly Miller. She's now in high school. She's in the 10th grade. I had her when she was at Evans Middle School. But with her and her mother and two others, when I go to events like this, I try my best to take one with me, so they can see. Because I'm like talking behind people behind their back. You really been talking about children, and you don't see them in the room. So I brought her here. I like her to stand up so that she can get the kind of recognition that she deserves.
Jay. And again, I want to thank Jay for hosting us and the rest of you for being so attentive.
Oh, okay. Good afternoon. I'm Cherie Harder, and I'm here representing the First Lady, who is very sorry she can't be here today. She is in Paris, otherwise she would be here, as this is something that's very important to her. And we really just want to thank Jay Hine and Bob Woodson for all of their work in convening clearly a very important discussion. We thank you for that. Part of the reason why she would like so much to be here is, as many of you know, in 2005 State of the Union, the President announced the Helping America's Youth Initiative. And he asked the First Lady to really lead the effort. This initiative is not a government program, but it is an outreach effort, an initiative per se. And it's predicated on the idea that while it is very difficult for government to create caring adults, one thing that we can do is connect them with the folks who need them. And the efforts behind Helping America's Youth have been all involved with connection. There have been national conferences, regional conferences, and I think one of the most important tools, an interactive website, www.helpingamericasYouth.gov, which helps interested individuals go to that website, find key problems within their community, find highly effective organizations like the ones we've just heard about, and to be able to connect with them, bolster their efforts, invest their resources, and through that working together, really leverage the best of public and private efforts to really target efforts towards helping the most vulnerable in our society. But along with that, along with those tools and those conferences, the First Lady thinks that one of the most important things we can do is to really spotlight and thereby extend the work of highly effective faith-based and community initiatives who are already deeply involved in the work that you're doing. One of those examples is obviously the National Violence-Free Zone Project, and so we thank you for their efforts there. But along with that, obviously you can't do your work alone. You need help, both public and private. And not only the National Violence-Free Zone Project, but all sorts of other initiatives that are involved in helping America's youth. And so one thing that this panel is dedicated to is talking about how do we leverage those public and private partnerships so that the whole is even greater than the sum of the parts. So it's my pleasure to introduce two leaders in this area, Michael Grebe and John Daisy, who represent both sides of the public-private partnership. Michael Grebe is the president and the CEO of the Lynn and Harry Bradley Foundation, one of the more innovative and thoughtful foundations out there who've really underwritten and furthered some of the most groundbreaking research and efforts aimed at reducing violence, helping America's youth, and reinvigorating civil society. John Daisy is the CEO of Prince George's Public Schools and has been among the first to commit school dollars in putting violence-free zones actually in the schools. And from different things that I've heard about Mr. Daisy, he really puts his money where his mouth is, not only investing school dollars, but also getting actively involved in recruiting different young adults to walk the halls, inviting them over to his house for dinner, and getting involved in their lives just as they are getting involved in the lives of at-risk kids in the schools. So with that, I'd really like to turn it over first to Mr. Grebe and then to Mr. Daisy to give their thoughts about how best to leverage these public-private partnerships.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. On behalf of the Bradley Foundation, I would also like to thank Jay Hine and the White House Office of Faith-Based and Community Initiatives for convening this series of roundtable discussions and for inviting all of us to be here today. I'm here, as Sherry indicated, as a representative of the philanthropic community. I represent a group of foundations and private donors who are already involved in supporting violence-free zone programs across the country. Bob earlier referred to Bernie Marcus and the Marcus Foundation. They have been very generously supportive of these programs. But there's room in this philanthropic activity for donors of all sizes. Ramon earlier referred to Rick Wiederholt from Milwaukee, who's the head of the Betty Brin Foundation. The Brin Foundation has also been very actively involved in supporting violence-free zone programs. So there is already an incredibly large group of us donors in this area, and I would expect that we would expand both in number and in the dollar amount of our support dramatically as the demonstrable success of these programs becomes better known. The Bradley Foundation has long been a supporter of faith-based and community initiatives. We do that as part of an area of grant making that we refer to as our new citizenship programs. Bob Woodson came to Milwaukee several years ago to help us get those programs started in our own community. At the time, he worked with one of our senior program officers, Bill Chambra, who I see is here today. Bill's from the Hudson Institute, and he, of course, is a well-known expert on the role of philanthropy in support of a vibrant civil society. It is through that part of our grant-making activity that we have for some time now supported the Latino Community Center and Ramon in their good work. And we're now involved in helping support a violence-free zone program in our own public schools in Milwaukee. And I thought I would just briefly tell you a little bit about that and our role in it. Not because I think we in Milwaukee have all the answers, but because it might be an example of the tremendous opportunity for public-private partnerships in support of these programs. Ramon only touched on it, but we have in Milwaukee a serious problem with violence in our public schools. And it is endemic. It's not necessarily limited to any one part of the city. And we have heard from many people the usual calls for more law enforcement in our high schools in particular, and also our middle schools, as an approach to solving the problems associated with that violence. I think we all understand that there is a role for law enforcement, but we also understand that there is a much better way, and you heard about that today from experts who are working in that field. Recently, Bob Woodson was introduced to the superintendent of the Milwaukee Public School System and to some other community leaders. He and I have met with representatives of the public school system, with other community organizations, and we are in the process of putting together a private-public partnership to introduce violence-free zone programs in several public high schools in Milwaukee. Even though the applause for that should be directed to people like Bob and Ramon, not me. The superintendent has a $5 million budget for security in the Milwaukee public school system. He has spent almost all of it on enforcement and surveillance, and has only a little money left to help support this pilot program. But he believes in the prospects for the program, has publicly indicated so, and has been willing to contribute a relatively modest amount of financial support for the program. Our foundation indicated that we would double that, and that we would also go out and raise the rest of the money from other private sources in the community so that we can start these programs in these schools on a pilot basis. On the 31st of this month, Bob is going to visit us in Milwaukee, and he and Ramon and I and others are going to present this concept, this opportunity, to the other prospective donors in the community. And it's an interesting group that we have in attendance. Almost all of the likely suspects in the philanthropic community are attending. So, I'm pretty sure, is our city's mayor. So is the superintendent of the Milwaukee Public School System. So is our newly elected Milwaukee County District of Attorney. So is the alderman who chairs the Safety Commission of the Milwaukee City Council, with whom Bob has met. So just the attendance at this meeting, I think, gives you a picture of the opportunity that there is in these programs for healthy and vibrant public-private partnerships. I think there's tremendous opportunity here. Why? Well, first and foremost, going back to one of Bob's early comments, these programs work, and they work in demonstrable ways. There is data to show that they work. They work because they're grassroots. They work, I think, for philanthropists because they're not top-down. They provide us with an opportunity to support effective programs in the community in a way that's not intrusive to the people who are providing the services. They're nonpartisan. At least they ought to be. They can be supported across the board by people wherever they reside on the political spectrum, and we're beginning to see that in Milwaukee. They are, to a large extent, non-ideological. They focus, again, on what works. Now, we all know that these programs work in great part, frequently, because of the faith of the people involved in them. But by and large, they are non-ideological programs, and I think from a fundraising perspective can appeal to a broad group of people. I understand that there may have been a few foundations, basically leftist organizations, that have been harshly critical of these programs, but there are very few of them. So I think there's room for broad financial support for these programs. So I would say to all of the potential partners, the trite phrase, the trite statement that this can be a win-win situation for everyone. It can be a win for public officials. We understand that public safety is first and foremost a government function, but these programs can be vitally important, critically important to solving the problems of violence in our communities and in our schools. So I would encourage them, the public officials, whether they're municipal or officials of the school boards, of the schools, the public school systems, to reach out to the private sector for assistance. I think they're a win for philanthropists. We can play an important role in helping address problems of our community, but we can also do it in an incredibly cost-effective way. These organizations that we support do amazing things with relatively modest amounts of money. And they are accountable, and they provide data to demonstrate their success. Most important, this can be a win for troubled youth in our communities, for whom this can be a transformational and truly life-saving experience. So I'm very, very optimistic about the opportunities we have here for public-private partnerships. Thank you.
It's slightly cost underrepresented. Every single thing in our community, everything in our community plays out in our public schools. There is nothing that doesn't. Good, troubled, stressed, joyous, violent, everything comes inside of our schools. I'm going to begin by thinking about what I was doing some thinking about yesterday when we took part in a number of opportunities to celebrate King's birthday. He repeatedly spoke about building a beloved community and the necessity for a beloved community. And of course, was pretty clear about the warning that if we don't build a beloved community, then we're actually going to have to deal and besieged with violence as a result of that. He didn't talk about a beloved school, and he didn't talk about a beloved organization or a beloved business or a beloved household. He was very specific about the word community. And if you read through a lot of his readings, that phrase repeated itself. So it had to have been deliberate in his thinking. I think it's incredibly important because this work in schools, quite frankly, that I'm going to talk a little bit about in terms of partnership, cannot work just with the folks who work inside a school organization. For me, it was really a no-brainer. I mean, you look at the organization, this particular organization, Bob and his staff's work, and you find every penny you can in the budget to bring it into the schools. Because of the track record, and we experienced very similar, track record. Year before, we're over 130 incidences of suspendable condition, and we have 50 the year after. The organization works with us and enters, and that's just Bladenburg High School. I'm going to talk a little bit about this notion of partnership in school, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the youth and why this is so important for us. I frequently gather groups of students together, like I do faculty, like I do principals, for a really honest conversation together in forums. And when the youth are together with me, we have repeated kind of similar questions. How are things going? What could make things better? What are the major issues you work with? And I think that most people probably wouldn't be surprised if they worked in schools that little, if any, of that conversation is about the food in the cafeteria or what they're getting. Kids go immediately. If you ask them, they will tell you. And they go to immediately to what they perceive are the most critical issues. I want to work hard. I want to be challenged academically. I want what other youth get. I want to get out. I want to go to college. I want to stay in college, and I want to earn a living. And if you ask them, you know, what's the most important part about that in a school, you can be absolutely arrested by the answer. Kids will tell you in their own words, and I quote, "I matter. And I need people to know I matter in school." And I can only know that if someone has some form of relationship with me that acknowledges that I am worthwhile beyond just a number coming in out of school. So I need adults to believe in me, to trust me, and I need to trust adults. That theme repeats itself over and over again. So the reason I say that is because, you know, that's obviously very powerful to have youth tell you that. And they will share some of the stories that we heard this evening, and they're not always making the best decisions. And their conditions inside that community lead them to really stress and worry about a million things, holding down 2 jobs so that the family can eat, visiting members of the family in prison, knowing that they are the caregiver for a younger sibling. So that homework comes way, way late in the issue. And the issues of belonging are very, very important. So kind of with that as a backdrop, here's what I believe about schools. We do a lot of things really well. There's some things we don't do so well, and that's another conference. But for this conference, we do lots of things real well. We actually know how to teach biology. And we know how to teach reading. And in the right conditions and with the right support, we can do a spectacular job with that. What I don't think that schools know how to do well is partner. Partnering is a skill set that doesn't naturally occur for schools. So we struggle at that. And I don't think there's any kind of shame around that. We really do struggle with that. It's actually not something we know how to do well. So we think about partnering with parents. We would like parents to show up on the first day of school, drop your children off, say some really nice things, and come back on June 30th, the end of the year, and pick your child up again, and really just don't complain to us. Send us 3 or 4 times a year a nice note about how well we're doing. That is our notion, I think, of partnership. That would be really great if that were the case. The reality is that's just not true at all. We're less successful at that with outside organizations. And here's why I think that's the case. We're very threatened, I think, as schools by outside organizations. Are they here to take jobs? Are they here to do something better than we are? Are they going to show us up? Those, quite frankly, are all adult issues which have got nothing to do with the fact that at Bladensburg, there are 2,000 youth who in 6 years are going to be switching the signal on the metro that we'll take home from here, who are going to be changing the tire on a plane that you'll probably take out of BWI, who are going to put an IV in your arm, who are going to take care of my dad when he is in assisted living, and me if they're a 7th grader. They have got to develop agency, and they need to be successful. We depend upon that. So the fact that there are no disposable youth in our schools, none whatsoever, is why those adult issues really need to be on the surface and dealt with. They can't actually be in the way. So the organization and the partnership, there are enough worries in school for a lot of people to share those and help with that. And I say that because actually you need people to kind of clear the brush so that the partnership can thrive and survive. The particular model of having the youth workers in school is so profoundly effective because we actually have lots of people in schools who have other jobs. You're not taking away a job. You're actually allowing us to do that job better. And being just totally upfront about that, I think allows a partnership to be really clear about that. You are not here to be the police or the security. Okay, we're paying other people by that. Oh, the $5 million budget, though, so my board president, I might want to talk to her about that fee. But they have another job. You are not here to do that. You have a very different notion of job. And be upfront about that. We need you in the school for us to do well. And when you have leadership, like the kind that I have the privilege to be colleagues with, you make it really clear that this, working together as a group of adults, must work because we are actually here so that all of those youth and every single one of those youth can be successful. And so I think the notion of partnership is to say where we don't do so well around this and find out how we can be mutually working together, not for our benefit. We have agency, we're employed, we have jobs. And in an organization where the majority of our youth are non-white, and I as a leader am a white male of privilege, I think it's incredibly important to be really clear that the only purpose of leadership is to build agency in youth. And to make sure that those youth, and to make sure that those youth understand that that's our purpose. And so when adults are really public about that partnership, that's as much as the role model, as the cafeteria where the youth worker can stand in one corner and actually be connecting with the young lady who's trying to make what I will believe will be a life and death decision that evening when she has to go back home, and helping with that. Or the two men in the corridor who are about to cut out and make a life and death decision when they leave our school. We have to be really clear about how that partnership can work. So to me, it wasn't a lot of thinking that I wanted to use public dollars to support this. Of course you do. There is 135,000 youth who are depending on us investing in that. I'd rather any day invest in a successful model that is preventative than have to put more cops in schools to criminalize the kind of response we have to. They, of course, have a role, and I understand that, but the investment beforehand makes sense. Of course, there are a couple of organizations that sometimes haven't been skittish. That's okay. You're welcome to volunteer any day, lunchtime in particular, and we would be glad to have you work side by side with us. I think that would be great. It's a little bit about, for us, what's been an incredibly successful model, and we're actually very, very grateful.
Thank you very much. We are running just a little bit late, but you have been intentionally invited to be here because of your leadership. So we want to invite you to share a comment if you want to do so, or a question. We have the federal agencies that I referenced earlier present. They can field a question if you have a specific point for them. Otherwise, let me open the floor for just a couple of questions before Director Walters will help us close. Yes, sir.
I just want to thank Bob. I've been to his house and spent the night there, me and a young whippersnapper who is a federal congressman now. God willing to be mayor of the fifth largest city in America, Philadelphia. But I'm glad I came here today, Bob, because as a young man, having ridden on a stolen bike or two, I realized after all of the years of college, all of the years of training that you, Sister Falaka, gave us, going downtown, becoming a part of economic development and all of that, I went back to the very neighborhoods that we were a part of the problem from. And guess what I realized, Bob? That I had grown up and that I was no longer relevant to the young predator perpetrator in that community. But the saving grace is that I was wise enough and trained well enough by you and Falaka to identify me from 20 years ago in the eyes of young people in that corner. So as possibly a council person and working in the next administration, I want to take that training and now take it to the next level and apply policy, a bottoms-up approach, solution solving programs. So once a revolutionary, now I hope to be a solutionary.
Thank you very much. Quick question here.
groups that were around me in the external environment. And what I'd like to know from the presenters are the partnerships that take place outside of the framework, the middle school, elementary school framework. What do we do to provide them opportunities and training to connect with civic society when there's a lack of job opportunities and educational opportunities?
Yes. Yeah, Bill.
It's good to see you again. You set a great example, Bob, and I don't think any of the rest of us are going to live up to it, but we're all going to try. You're doing a great job. There is a real need, and I would just like to ask, is there a possibility that you can put something on one of the internet spots about some of not only the acceptable examples of national initiatives, but some of the local ones, so that in each region, whether it's not just Southwest, Northwest, but Mid-Atlantic region, we can see the 20 top gang prevention organizations. Now, I work with an organization, Bill Emery, God's Ex-Gangsters, in Hampton Roads. We have 2 million people there. Not quite as big as DC. We have a gang problem, and we work with that. We work with the community initiative. It's pretty successful. But I'd like to know what's being done in Charlottesville or Raleigh or in the area within 150 to 200 miles. And my hopes would be that perhaps we could learn something from each other.
Right.
And I just wanted to ask, is that possible? That might be a...
Yes, indeed. Thank you for that prompt. I'll mention on behalf of the office that we are doing that type of gathering through leaders at the state and local level that seek help from our office in coordination. And so we are tracking that, and will communicate further through our website and our conference activity more of what communities of practice might look like. Yes?
Just one quick response to that question. That one of the reasons that I invited several people here, B.J. Stone and others like him, who are the founder of Outback Restaurants, because when I said to B.J., and I love to embarrass him, but the reason I've asked B.J. to partner with me is because I said to him, you have gone from one restaurant to 40. I want to know, how can we take what you have done with restaurants and do it with our violence-free zones? So there's an awful lot of business expertise that exists that our folks need. Because we know a venture capitalist will tell you, too much capital, Curtis, can suffocate an entrepreneur, too little can starve it to death. One of the worst things you can get is what people pray for. Thank God I didn't get the money I thought I needed when I needed it, because I wasn't prepared to manage it. And it would have destroyed me if I had gotten it. But I need someone to work with us to help us to plan, to raise resources, and to spend it in such a way so that what works in 5 cities can work in 50 cities, but it has to grow along a responsible continuum so that we maintain quality control, so that we can have superintendents all over this nation be able to stand up and say what Dr. Dacey said today. But the only reason way he can do that is if we are good stewards in the way we grow our success, so that it truly, we have to maintain quality standards, the code of conduct that we have, the screening of personnel that we have, the prohibitions we have about who can get in with those kids. All of those standards have to be maintained, and that's what we're asking BJ. And there may be other business leaders here who have experience in growing business. We want to hear from you so that you can partner with some of our local organizations to help them to grow, as BJ is helping us to manage our national effort.
Good words, thank you. I will ask for one more question. Yes?
I think we also
No.
need to not just look at programs that we think are successful with young people. We need to also talk to young people and find out from them what programs they think are successful.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. I'll take one more question.
Thank you very much. Dr. Woodson, for many years too, has been a mentor of mine as well. And I grew up in D.C. and Anacostia, Southeast. And what we're doing, I would like to ask everybody to focus on Prince George's County for a second, because it's for Valentine's Day this year. I do now, I make lipstick, right, and lip gloss. And we're going to contribute our proceeds starting from this February to the next February as a tribute to all mothers, sisters, and daughters to Prince George's County Public Schools, and we partner with Sprint Nextel and Exhale Cosmetics. I'd like to partner with Bob as we launch this thing in February. And we're going to do this fundraiser for a whole year for Valentine's Day. So God bless you and thank you very much.
Thank you for that comment. Thank you. Just before I bring Director Walters up, let me thank you for tolerating the temperature. It's been an especially warm winter so far in Washington, D.C., so we thought we'd correct that a bit and make it a little chillier today. So I am sorry if you were uncomfortable, but you were treated, of course, to a wonderful set of inspiring stories and encouraging stories that hopefully will equip you better to understand the needs that we face and indeed to be emboldened to respond to them. Director Walters was sworn in as a member of President Bush's cabinet in December of 2001. His role as Director of the Office of National Drug Control Policy is new to this administration, but his leadership to ONDCP and his role in fighting drugs is effort that has spanned the decades. He has been a thought leader. He's had a distinguished career in academia, in think tanks, in the nonprofit sector, and indeed in his public service. I couldn't help but reflecting a bit as I sat next to you, Director Walters, and we listened to the bike stealers sort of describe their experiences in the parking lot, actually, which is a problem that you think of often at your desk and your efforts are pointed toward. I thought what a remarkable event it is today where we're not only seeing transformed lives and the difference making being done in communities through these models, but how remarkable and what a privilege it is for us to share a room together where we have people setting policy on enforcement and prevention and those solving policy. We need more of that. So I feel encouraged that this was indeed an experiment tested well, that this is the type of convening we need more of. And because of your unique experience, not only your role in the administration, but in participating in the national conversation for so long, we're honored to welcome you now to the podium, Director Walters, to help us summarize perhaps what we've heard and to share some closing reflections.
Well, thank you, Jay. On behalf of myself, my colleagues at ONDCP, my colleagues here at the White House offices, many of whom have been recognized, and Bob, who has spent an awful lot of time teaching me, as I know he's been involved with many of you. And I won't claim to be a student worthy of your efforts, but I've learned that the education is ongoing, and that as one of the previous speakers said, you're usually right, even when it doesn't seem like it at the time. I want to thank also some of the other people here that, those of you that have been working this field, which is I think most of the people I've seen here, some of whom I know, some of whom I don't, already know it's not quite as easy as it sounded here because, while it's common sense and while many people will agree to it, they don't mean it. When Bob and some of you go to schools and say, we can help you with violence, we're going to bring ex-offenders and drug dealers and gang members into your school, they don't hear anything after that point. They're saying, who put this appointment on my schedule? Why did I take this phone call? And what the heck is going on here? What we want, I think, is obviously to do a better job with our young people. It's painful to watch the destruction that we have in too many communities where we want to have hope. And we're obviously reminded by Dr. King's birthday that his dream was about them. We have to ask ourselves every year, how are we doing with his dream? And I don't think any of us in this room can be satisfied. I don't think most Americans can be satisfied. The test that we have is, I think, not just a test of faith, the faith that people who have seen the ugly sides of life and addiction and crime, victimization, can be changed. The testimonies we've seen here today are obvious proof of that. But I don't think that proof is as pervasive as as many people need to have it. It's really about a faith in ourselves and about a faith in that change and about a faith in whether or not we can change the lives of those who are at risk. the real issue when you sit in government, and sometimes we aspire to higher office for the purposes of thinking that we're going to be the kind of multiplication of the individual that does more. Many of you have been around well enough to know that that's not true. What gets done one person to another person, one adult, one peer to one child. There is no way, I mean, the president, if he could do it, any president, if he could do it, would save all the children. You save the children, and the people who work with you save the children. The best that we do is not get in the way, maybe provide some support and some help and some voice to what you do, as you see here today. But again, without you, that doesn't happen. And in fact, the children you're trying to save have in some ways been failed over and over and over again, which is why they're in the condition that they're in. And some of them have lost faith, and our communities have. Many times, I know many of you in the programs that you're working in ultimately got called in not because you were the first choice, but because it was so bad. They said, well, heck, you know, let's bring in the people of faith. In fact, maybe they're the only ones that'll go there. Yeah, I met Joe Clark, and you had to ask yourself, you know, there was a question when I worked at the Department of Education, and Secretary Bennett met Joe Clark. It's like, well, wait a minute, he's done some things, you know, chaining doors, carrying baseball bats. Is that something we want to support? Well, you know, we talked about it in what kind of person goes into that environment? I mean, either a person who believes that they can make change, which most of the people in that environment did not believe, they walked away, or someone who believes that it's not about them, it's about God that's going to help them find the way, and that this is what they have to do. We're accused of sometimes being concerned about faith groups because we have a hidden agenda. And I think what's been clear in the conversation here today is everybody who works in this field wants to stand on their results. They're not asking you to have the same faith as them or to back their faith or to anything else. You may have your own beliefs, you may find other beliefs in the course of working together, but it's about being willing to stand on the results of your work. That's something we can all come together on in this area. And I think we need to restore the faith in leadership in the country and in the people that this is being done. You are the examples of restoring that faith, the examples of rebirth in communities as well as in individual lives. And it's those individual lives, and there's some which of course are our communities. One of the great blessings of my job is meeting people in drug treatment. And I presume that some of you who spoke today have gone through your own problems of addiction and abuse. And what I tell people who I sometimes work with in government who have lost their way and become weary is go to a drug treatment center. Go to an AA meeting or an NA meeting. Because if you think miracles don't happen anymore, go there and hear people talk about the nightmare of their lives that they had to put together. People who gave up on their own children, people who gave up on themselves, people whose mothers and fathers gave up on them, and who walked back and reestablished a connection. But more importantly than that, that understand that connection depends on giving back again and again and again. People who deep down inside live what a lot of people in politics give speeches about, citizenship and caring about and service. They live it every day, and they live it quietly in a dignified manner, and they save lives. They don't just talk about saving lives. I want to thank you for what many of you have done and the opportunity that we have to work with you, and that from the, I hope you know from Bob, if no one else, that the lofty positions of government at whatever level really are no better than you. And our ability to stand with you, to enlist more people to work with you. And it's hard for us, for all the reasons that you've touched on and more here today. It's because it requires us to actually come together as citizens and solve problems. And not just say, well, he doesn't like me, he won't talk to me, he doesn't care, and so I can't do my job. We don't like having to work with people. We like them to do what we're told. I appreciated the superintendent talking about parents, because my experience as an educative policy person is we want parent involvement. My experience as a parent is get lost or do what we tell you. That's not a good thing, but you understand why the complications of real life make it possible. It requires a faith in our fellow human beings and in the community that we live in. That's what's really been shattered. The lives of these children are a measure, maybe the most shocking measure, of that fragmentation, that in the midst of plenty in the world, in the midst of this city, radically different realities for children who live very short distances apart and are separated. And until we are able to find through you a way to connect that, we can't do what we should do. So let me thank you again for the lives you save, for the children you reach, and for allowing us an opportunity to learn and allowing us an opportunity in a small way to be minor contributors to your work. We'll try to be there. The President has made that a commitment. The President has taken criticism for making that a commitment, as you know, but he will not waver because he knows what you know. There is no other way. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you all. We're officially adjourned, and wish you safe travels.